Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Haley Mitchell Haugen. I am the editor of Sheila-Na-Gig Online and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. And tonight we have gathered to celebrate the publication of Alison Hicks' full-length collection, Homing, from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. And then we'll be having an invited mic reading from contributors to Sheila-Na-Gig Online's Winter 2024 issue. I'm going to give a brief little introduction of Alison. Many of you already know her, of course. But Alison Hicks was awarded the 2021 Birdie Prize from Meadowlark Press for Knowing is a Branching Trail. Previous collections are You Who Took the Boat Out and Kissed, a chapbook, Failing Dreams, and a novella, Love, a Story of Images. Her work has appeared in Eclipse, Gargoyle, Permafrost, Poet Lore, and many other literary publications. She was named a finalist for the 2021 Beulah Rose Prize from Smartest Pace, an Editor's Choice selection for the 2024 Philadelphia Stories National Poetry Prize, and nominated for a Pushcart Prize by Green Hills Literary Lantern, Quartet Journal, and Nude Bruce Review. She is founder of Greater Philadelphia Wordshop Studio, which offers community-based writing workshops. So honored to be able to publish Homing by Alison Hicks, and it's been out for a little while now, but not too long. But this is our first formal, kind of big Sheila-Na-Gig presentation of it. So welcome, Alison. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Haley. And I want to say that I want to thank Haley for hosting this, of course, and of course for publishing the book. And this had a little bit of a journey to get published. And so I was really glad that it found a home, and especially a home at Sheila-Na-Gig, because they had published a poem of mine back a couple of years ago, 2020, and I remembered that. And it's been a real joy to work with Haley. Before I forget, somebody asked me about the cover, this lovely cover, and I'm really glad to kind of promote this, because this is a painting. It's a collage, really. It's mixed media, I guess is what they call it. I'm not a visual artist, but by a friend of mine who is a poet and a visual artist, and her name is Catherine Bancroft, and she is in a weekly poetry group that on Saturdays that takes up like the middle of my day on Saturdays. And we're supposed to end at 1:30, but we usually go much later than but it's one of the things that keeps me writing. This group is wonderful. And I thought, when I knew that, I had no idea what I wanted for the cover for this, but I knew that Kitty had a bunch of paintings in her house, and her latest series had been based on photographs of people from Ellis Island. And I knew that that wouldn't quite work for this book, but I knew she had to have other things. So I said, can I come over to your house and just like look at your stuff? And, and I did. We went through various rooms, and I found, I think I narrowed it down to about 5. And this one, the deer, was one of them. Um, and I also had in mind another thing too, but I couldn't get hold of the artist. And then when I looked at them too, I thought, this really, I think I really like this better. Um, and so that's how it came to be. And Kitty has been in a couple of exhibitions in Philadelphia. Outside of Philadelphia, you probably wouldn't know her name, but it's Catherine Bancroft. She's also a wonderful poet. So that's the story on the cover. And really, I sent the image over to Haley, and she mocked up 2 covers, and we saw this green, and we were like, yeah, and everybody I showed it to said, yeah. So it kind of fell into place. It was a wonderful story. So with that, I'll actually start reading some poems. And what I thought I would do for this is kind of drop you into what I consider kind of the heart of the book. And it's a series of 6 poems that's called Homing, and that's where the title for the book came from too. And I wrote it with this poetry group over summer, and it's interesting how you don't, sometimes I wasn't really sure, is this really a series? Does these really go together? And sometimes you just got to trust, and that's what our workshop leader said. You just got to trust it. And it's interesting, the more I read it, and when you have a book coming out, you have to keep reading it because you have to be proofing it and all kinds of editorial things. So you're forced to read it over and over and over again. Um, I kept seeing the things that put this together as a series on, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't really realize. So, believe in the unconscious. Anyway, this is Homing, and the first poem, a lot of the information in this comes from a wonderful book called, oh God, it's going to go out of my, Merlin Sheldrake's book. Oh gosh, I knew this would happen to me. Entangled, entangled something. Anyway, I'll get it later. I'll look in my notes and tell you it later. But it's all about fungi, basically, everything you didn't know about fungi. So anyway, this is Lives of Truffles. Homing, it's called, when fungal hyphae attract other hyphae, fuse and branch to form a spreading, sensing net in the dark under our feet, where we don't care to look, stitching roots and soil together. Fluent in chemicals, mycorrhizal networks have no need of sun. Get sugar from tree roots they must partner with or die. The underground fruit produce scents that rise through earth, penetrate senses of animals who live on the surface, compelling enough to dig up and consume, every bite packed with spores. Through the subterranean mycelium spreads, feeding by touch, exploring, its shifting shape carrying its map and its history, where it's been and where it's going, meeting the world where it is, digesting. And this is Two Loons on Misty, and Misty is a lake in northern Ontario in Algonquin Provincial Park. Running on water is not enough. A headwind is required to lift a bird built for diving. At the base of the lake, they line up, slapping feet and wings against water, drawing air under wings. Evolutionary design, like the humankind, forced into trade-offs. Wings too short for flying, they flap from Canada to Florida shores, too heavy for air if one feather is missing. 3, Two Tones Against Brick. Baby shoe, white and blue, on a brick sidewalk. Upright, as if waiting for a foot to come along, insert itself into it. Leather, expensive, the kind of shoe a parent might retrace steps to find, the kind my son would have kicked off. I was on my way to visit a friend whose husband had died, my small foot too big. A woman from grad school told me she would find discarded arms and legs of dolls in streets and gutters. They're everywhere once you start looking for them, she said. Discarded baby shoe, the closest I have come. Like everyone, I am bewildered by time. I do not seek to go back. Whatever the age, the heart is held in a nest of pain, a different pain for each age. Through a tunnel on a towpath along a canal, I once hiked long enough so that in the middle no light came in from either side. Nothing for it but to keep walking. My friend ahead of me, I can make out her back in the dusk. I'm afraid to reach the place she is passing. I place a hand on the damp bricks that make up the arch above me. I worry for myself, for all of us, how we will sleep. 4, Teachers. I figured it out the year of the French trip, the way she talked about him. I didn't think how far it might have gone, enough for me then to know she loved him. I turned the intimation in my heart's light, staring into it, feeling protective and virtuous, keeping it to and for myself. When he was fired, years after we'd graduated, and another teacher too, for the same reason, my informant said, not needing to name it. Kind of a shame, she added. He was a good teacher. She was right, he was. The shock, there'd been others. My friend married another student from that trip, both French teachers now. Was it possible he didn't know? Maybe, like me, he'd held that knowledge for her until it broke open over them, sealing an intimacy no one else could touch. The way you might hold a coat for someone until their arms are ready to slip through the sleeve. 5. Jasmine is not the same as night blooming jasmine. You wake to the pain of who you are, lines remembered rushing in, a self you shed in sleep. On stage you stumble, sword plunged into the belly of you, waking to the pain. Decisions you've made, actions taken, wrong, untrue to the self emerging in your sleep. The waking one's a mess you would not choose, gnawing truth, the pain of being you. Not opening eyes, you grasp to return. No, awake, aware, nothing you can do. Step into the self you shed in sleep. As morning continues, it grows on you. The pain you wake to, who you are, skin of the self you'll shed tonight in sleep. And this is 6, Who Will Find Us? I want a larger territory than a screen and 2 fingers allow. Give me maps impossible to fold back correctly. It would not frustrate me that they never sit flat, bulge awkwardly, testifying to my inadequacy. Let them unfold, propped up on the steering wheel, over your entire body in the driver's seat, encroach into the passenger side, provoking vigorous objection, sharp corners just missing eyes, as you try to find your location or somewhere that you are seeking in the pasture of white and green and intersecting lines. Okay. That's the big kahuna, as they say. So now we'll have some shorter ones. This is the party. No mystery, we are a mystery to ourselves. Bottle we cannot drink from, only pour for others. Track the play of florals, musk, and fruit in animation of faces and voices. Some pour extravagantly, overflowing glasses splashing onto white shirts. Others emit, measuring from a source finite, unrefillable. Who the wiser? The stain broadcasting its presence, refusing bleach, the vessel placing itself on a shelf as a work of art. Both trying to make a statement while it's possible. We don't know what happens once the bottle's empty, the party's over, after guests have staggered back home, and years later rave about the night, clarity of stars seen from the bridge, wine unlike any before or since, sweeter and deeper, subtle. It went down easily as our blood. All right. This is I would not marry or have children. I was going to live in the woods by a stream, sleep on a pine needle mattress in a house made of sticks, dance, paint, make things from wood with my hands, crouch by a tree, write observations in a notebook. I chased talent, never catching up. I wanted to live with a musician, make love with a scientist, trained as a novelist till plot undid me. I married the librarian, the archivist conserving letters from brilliant minds for this future to unseal. I had a child, watched him grow into the naturalist I did not become. I thought about hiking the Appalachian or Pacific Coast trails, still infatuated with openings. If I lost everything, I could join the Buddhist monastery, shave my head, sit zazen, study the sutras. No ceremony necessary. Words always a part of it. For better or worse, I accept my hand. What I enjoyed about this poem was the way that we do have these romantic notions of what we might do, and then, then there's the reality of what we actually do. Okay, let's see what's next here. A little different here. Nightscape. There were dogs and stars in the silence. Strange thing. Dogs running, stretching front legs, claws eating up earth, stars popping into the clear night like Matisse's cutouts, silhouettes of dogs in black. I followed them over frozen ground. It seemed important to convey stars and the dogs running, only I didn't have the words. They came afterwards. In the moment, I had the paper, movement of legs, and light from the stars that was in the process of reaching me. Let's see, what's my next one here? Here it is. Okay. This is called Field Notebook at Tinicum, and the John Heinz Refuge at Tinicum is a nature refuge that is in the city of Philadelphia. It is right next to the I-95 highway, the Delaware River, the airport, railroad tracks. It's about next to all the kind of infrastructure you could imagine, but it is also a stop on the East Coast Flyway. So it is a refuge where there are a lot of birds. This poem takes place in winter, so there aren't so many birds at this particular time. Because it's near the airport, when my son was in college, my husband and I realized that when we put him on the plane to go back to Colorado, we could go walking in the Heinz Refuge. The other little thing that, a little reference in here is that my son had gone on a study abroad program in Galapagos, and they didn't bring any laptops. Their assignment was basically to keep a field notebook, and he had this little set of traveling watercolors. And he produced this beautiful field notebook from his time there. But this is my notebook, Field Notebook at Tinicum. I could have used the set of traveling colors, the brush with its barrel of water, winter hues, ice-covered shallows, dry stalks, ragged heads of phragmites, sparrows that flew back and forth in the grove. Plank bridge across the neck, where ice gives way to deeper water. Quiet, considering the highway, the train tracks, the airport, walking here after the drop-off. Squares of color arrayed, shifting with sunset, paper holding the rinse. All right. So now I'm going to take you from Philadelphia to Western Massachusetts, where I grew up. When I was 7, we kind of moved out to the country. And we were near three reservoirs. We're in walking distance of us, and not that far from us was the Quabbin Reservoir, which is a huge reservoir, and there were towns that were sunk in order to provide drinking water to Boston. So there's a small reference to that here, but this is one of the more local reservoirs. Hill Reservoir. The last day of the year, My father and I walked to the reservoir, down the dirt road behind the church. Heat radiated up legs to skin, sweat gathering at my back. We turned into the rise, steps of the chute through snatches of pine. The dog bounded through drifts, waiting at the clearing. The sun skimmed the tree line on the other shore. A sapling sprouted from the tower's crumbling top. It was not the Quabbin, below which 3 towns lay sunk. As far as we know, it had no name. No ghost lay beneath its ice. All the time we were standing there, breath fogging air, where we couldn't see. Water was moving, layers falling, rising, cooling and dropping, passing quietly over fish hugging the bottom. Another Western Massachusetts poem here. Swing. My father made me a swing in the upper meadow above the stone wall, below the edge of the woods. He pulled a rope that lasted through my childhood over the limb of a maple, passed the ends through holes in either side of a sanded board and knotted them. Didn't rot through until I was home from college, trying to figure out how to do what I wanted to do, fit into the inhospitable world that in the end I had to leave home for. Those lonely, uncertain years I want to toss as far away as I can. My son carries back, dog with a stick in its mouth, wagging its tail, nudging my leg to make me throw again. And I will say nothing really brings you back to your 20s like having a child and when you're trying to get launched in adult life than having a child who is trying to do the same thing, only and always seems that it never gets easier. Okay, so we'll change the tone a little bit. This is Debriefing with an Archangel. The envoy entered through my mouth. Without looking up from my reading, I took a swig of beer. Pain injected my lower lip. My hand went up, felt the streamlined body, flung it out. My tongue found the harpoon embedded in flesh on my inner lip. I pulled it out, held it neutralized in my hand. Dark pin with a bit of light at the end. You doubt that an archangel could take the shape of a flying insect? Read this as conceit? Consider a bee's work, gathering, pollinating, the ferrying of messages. Jacob wrestling with an unnamed opponent from whom he extracts a blessing. Through the rest of the night, the spot smarted and throbbed, the space around it discolored, swelling on the inside, visible when I pulled my lip down. In your experience, don't the most important messages sting, leave the greatest mark inside? The blessing inexplicable, merging into the bloodstream, rising to the tongue. And that is, I swear to God, a true story. Okay, I'm going to read just 2 more. And this first one is called Gone, Gone to the Further Shore, which is taken from the Heart Sutra. And the first part of it is in Abecedarian. It is not written in lines, but you'll see the progression through the alphabet. And then there are 3 other parts, but it'll be pretty clear when the parts change, so I won't indicate that. Gone, gone to the further shore. Take an aphorism, breathe the smell of cedar. Take diary, make a drawing of it. One earring off, massage the lobe. Forget where you left it, it will be a gift. Take your heart and wring it out, make tea with the water. Hurry on to the next thing. I don't know what to tell you. Jiggle the handle, kilometers, lift your arms, motion to the back. Nothing to lose. Oppose your thumbs, assume the position. Quarrel with necessity, reason with longevity, season lightly. Remember the tea made with your own heart water? You words, uvula, underwear, underwater, as King Lear directed the fool, unbutton here. A voracious appetite leaves no stone unturned. Wisdom sits under a rock. Xeriscape, is it yours? What is the song of a zebra mussel? Stare at the candle without blinking, we were instructed, until eyes flood with tears. The word exactly, flood. I focused on the flame. My eyes husks. Finally, I blew it out, eyes inflamed, as if I'd been crying. A box of tea, a spoon, a dried out acorn. Use the spoon to dig an acorn grave, sprinkle tea over it. He said the copper beech might have 2 more good years. The dog is 11. The lifespan for an American foxhound is 10 to 12 years. I will have entered a new phase of life. And I kind of wanted to read this because outside this window here, we did have a copper beech and it is now gone. It had to come down. It was diseased. And my old dog also succumbed this summer. So I have entered the new phase of life. I do have a new young dog. So I'm going to finish up. One of the themes here seems to have been dogs. And we were talking about dogs in the beginning. It's kind of funny, but I will finish up with the ask. 1. After I'd begged successfully for the job, they made me a professional. Easier to beg for an organization than for oneself, but a decent mission statement is hard to come by. All answers must be divisible by money. I tend to mix up digits, so they put me in charge of the words. 2. What do you beg for when no one is looking? Why is it hard to ask for what you want? 3. The dog places his paw on my thigh, flexes the webs between his claws. Not enough to hurt, just to keep a grip and to make sure I notice. Looks sideways at the floor. I am eating chicken. He knows my heart as only a supplicant can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison, for being here and reading these amazing poems. Just really great to hear your voice bringing them to life. So thank you so much. We have been celebrating Alison Hicks and her publication of her full-length collection, Homing, from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. Thank you. We are going to move now into our invited mic portion of the evening, and we have 6 contributors to our fall Sheila-Na-Gig online issue. Actually, it's our winter 2024 issue. And we are going to start off with Gary Grossman, frequent friend of Sheila-Na-Gig here.
Hi, everyone. I have COVID, so if I suddenly start hacking in the middle, you'll please forgive me. The first poem I'm going to read was published in Sheila-Na-Gig Online in December, and it's titled Tuesday, Late Summer in the Blue Ridge. As if 546 shades of green existed all at once on each Appalachian hillside. As if the red oak said, I'll be Viridian and you be mint, and shagbark hickory answered, no, I prefer dark moss, let striped maple be mint. As if the loamy soil conspired with these trees, arriving at how to pleasure all 5 human senses on this 21st day of August. As if ferns and streams had matched loins, then birthed an incantation so complex it had neither odor nor form, existing only as a slight tickle across your brow. As if an aphid crawled purposefully through the blonde forest of your left forearm. As if each and every touch could be not an annoyance, but a blessing. And the next poem I'm going to read is called Nothing Lasts. As Mom exhaled her last, I wondered how thoughts traverse closed eyelids and which memories would last like hard alabaster. I mean, there's always another pizza after my wife eats the last slice, even if I have to pick up the phone to reorder. Do we still say pick up the phone, or is it just where's my cell, blurted to a now empty room? And what about the last remaining Luxardo cherry in the jar? Original maraschino, though they have no stems, so you can't manage that bar trick for last call, the one of tying a knot in the stem using only your tongue. A flex, proving value as potential lover, if only for one last hour on one last night. And will your ultimate amour be the last person you'll entice into the empty atrium of your heart? When you take them, will it be your current home or your last flat? Or will both lover and house write themselves into the last chapter of your life? Wasn't it Schrodinger who said, everyone is both first and last, as well as someone in between? And the last poem I'll read is entitled Birding. What is this poetic obsession with great blue herons? I get their Taoist priests hunkered down in contemplation of Lao Tzu's new and selected thoughts, and that every scroll painted west of the Aleutian Islands looks better with a heron, brushed somewhere off-center to guard a river or a mountain pond. But what if fame arises just from large size and reluctance to fly? The ability to be rigid, so visible, as if someone plopped a 4-story gray concrete skyscraper down at Marsh's edge. They call, not to us, but to flatter themselves, a reed flattening, and when they move, they dump, leaving a graffito of bone-white uric acid. What if they're just big dumb birds that manage to stand still long enough to catch our eye? What if we're all just big dumb birds? Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm excited to be reading, and thank you, Haley and Allison. It was great. It's great to hear your poetry. I'm going to read the 2 poems that were published in the last edition of Sheila-Na-Gig. The first one is called Whipped. It was important to be unconscious during major holidays. The homemade eggnog, my alcoholic grandmother's recipe, providing only a tiny nod to dairy. First bourbon, brandy, and finally whole milk, cream, whipped egg whites, a froth of delicious poison doled out by tablespoons to children to conjure deep sleep, while Santa, that lovely lie, delivered his gifts. Years later, I made it for my adult children, and the grog was deemed the best ever. I never stirred it up again. Something unreal that night about the floor, the ceiling, the bright Christmas lights. All of us too happy, too calm, sitting in the vast living room that overlooked the cypress trees, Oakland spread out like a civic hallucination. How hopeful I was for this tradition to sweep up my new marriage, this new family, 2 stepdaughters with friends, partners, all of whom who like me, my sons, my family. We were a cobbled tribe built on a fissure, a marriage that would not hold. Here I am typing from another house, another place, holding down my own life, ignoring a tradition that will never occur again in this lifetime. The recipe card folded up in the back of a drawer, magic gone. And the second poem is I Write My Future, which is dangerous because sometimes you probably have had this happen. You write something, it comes true. So watch out, right? It's magical and bad. I write my future. My son tells me to be mindful, Craft carefully. He winks, remembering how I erased his former girlfriend at novel 3. What did I do to her? Got her accepted to a college in a cold city, wind whipping as she looked out the large window onto the frozen lake. I'm nasty that way, just as I was to myself when one of my characters left her perfectly good husband to take up with a man who would only reveal his dark side late in the narrative, which is now for me, my husband permanently back east eating cake with his family. What else? The mother with a declining brain, the sister living down under, the uncle who is really a brother. Don't write anything crazy, my son says, now that he is single again, broken up with the woman I wrote for him at the end of the Frozen Lake novel, a sparkly, wisecracking pixie, a wickedly smart writer, that character. But I ended the novel and things went off track in real life. So here is what I write now. The main character will happily be alone for a couple of years. She can't wait forever. She a ragged hen with missing tail feathers. She pulls weeds in her garden, paddles canoes in rivers and lakes, invites people over, sees movies, and watches birds with her new enormous binoculars. But that man in the other canoe, the one she likes, she finally asks him to coffee. I'm not going to write more and ruin it for them, yanking them both down a tragic relationship superhighway. This story won't be interesting. Nothing for a poem or a novel. Just a tale about two people who do some things and keep on living until they don't. The last word finally read. Poof, off they go, a wisp of nothing much. Don't make so much of the ending, my son says. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sara Eastler, and I'm going to read a poem that was published in the winter edition. It's actually an American sonnet. So it's 14 lines and it's very musical, but it doesn't rhyme at the end of the lines. And at the time that I was writing this, a lot of people don't know my background is actually in the sciences. So as a scientist, you're always learning how the world is connected, how people and plants are so similar. And nature will conserve whatever she can and pass it on as we evolve. So this poem was sort of related to that and my thinking about sort of rewriting a history of women. So this is called A Lesson in Plant Anatomy. We twine our lives around plants like living vines, a bean tendril that winds around the cornstalk, a helix of English ivy that climbs the scaffold of our brick dwellings and garden trellises to feed the blackbird and thrush. We trim and curate. We prune and repot. We water and feed. We breathe. We hand pollinate the squash, cucumber, and okra, brushing pollen sperm from anther tip to sticky stigma. We watch the ovaries fatten and fruit until we pluck and bite into. Juice and seed run rivulets down our sticky chins. We harvest the offspring to feed our own. We are all hungry for sweetness and truth. We are all happy to slake our thirst on the plants we stake to our garden beds. I also wanted to read a little bit, one more poem. I've had this fascination recently with figuring out what it means to be a woman. And that means learning a lot about the history of women and in part how women have been subjugated over time. And when it comes to the way that Western culture is set up, this brought me back to studies in ancient Greece. And it was hard to learn that in ancient Greece, it was considered the ideal age to be married at 14. because at 14, you were considered pliable. So you could still be trained under your new husband, who was 2 to 3 times your age. And often marriages were arranged by fathers. So sometimes a mother would come home and have no idea that that was the day her daughter was leaving. So this is a poem that's called Lament for a Lost Daughter. And it takes place on the day that the mother has just been informed that her daughter, who would have been age 14 or 15, has left the house to be married. There's one word in here that may be unfamiliar, and that's asphodel. The asphodel it's a white flower that grows in meadows. And in Greek mythology, there were fields of asphodels in the underworld, and this is where an ordinary soul might be sent to live after death as well. So this is called Lament for a Lost Daughter. On this still day, bits of wool fly off the loom. They float about, suspended in my room, little nymphs that shift when the breeze stirs. They glide out the window, passivity deferred, and wing over the meadow, an asphodel, above the backs of sheep from which they swelled. Not one lamb or ewe looks up from the grass as I weave, hands shuttling at my task, another dark thread through the backbone of fabric. At my ankles, loom weights clack. I mustn't let my thoughts furrow the brow, lest they cut lines on my forehead like a prow etches the water skin. It is bad luck to snap a thread. Only the fates may pluck at the weave of our lives, like shells sifted by fistfuls of sea, kept, discarded, shifted. Whims of gods and men are murky to predict. I fasten my daughter's likeness to depict just her back on the tapestry, long hair braided, cascading down tunic. Her face was shaded in veils. If only I could turn into an arrow of sunlight at dawn, landing anywhere a sparrow can, I would fling myself to the wind and glide straight to where she resides, my child, a bride.
Okay, I guess that was a end. Sara, what you said about nature will pass it on as it evolves, I found that really hopeful, and maybe I should work that into some of my own poetry going forward. But for the meantime, this is the poem that was published in the winter issue of Sheila-Na-Gig Journal. And it was written in a collaboration I had with Susan, who's here today as well. We were writing poems on Jewish life post October 7th. Months ago, the OBGYN cauterized to repair a surgical error. After, I sat in dusk under the magnolia, swallowtail washing iridescent. And now it's enough to sit down to new fabric, washed and ironed, sewing machine fitted, slender thread seeming a natural slant to the skirt running along wide hips. Wind scrapes the window when I lament women in another country, taken hostages 9 months ago, chained to an olive tree, branches, a string-tied bouquet, and further, to houses where men command. I want to picture instead new trees planted on a hillside, salt clustering the edge, dissolving, and the sea beyond, reflective. And each granule of my body says, bring home the young women, pregnant. Today, my husband asks, did the doctor appointment go well? And I groan, you've never seen an OBGYN, where gestation is a threat, where swallowtail wings batter the air. July, already gone to seed. So I'd like to read 3 total. Thank you. So I have 2 more, and these 2 are from my upcoming book, which is going to be published by Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. Thank you, Haley and Barbara. A manuscript that I finished a year ago, so I've had to refresh my memory on it. So it's good to read these poems. Now, my father was a social worker, and it's interesting having a father that had that as a job. So you learn many things about the world through his work inadvertently and conversations you're not supposed to know about. This is called Dispatch from the Nuns. My father returned with nuns' stories from the counseling sessions. Nuns slip from the headdresses, veiled at the waist, veiled at the eyes. They rounded names and dates in generalities to avoid suspicion. Drowsy and blue charcoal from extra duties. Backwards, he said. Sharpened shears for trimming vines, hidden in their robes. But what could they do except slice morning oranges, chant in the chapel? How did they take it, bone tattered, from standing long hours laundering? To mend priest's garment, they wrapped thread tight around their nails, cuticles nibbled until, like a lit sparkler, bright red dribbled a torrent. My father called it the machine of the church, yet he didn't say it was nothing compared to our family. My brother and I scribbled notes of our own, figured we got it right in case something happened, like solving a mystery. One night we saw our father crumpling paper from his pocket, so made up a story how he'd have to climb the black oak at the diocese campus. Well-rounded trunk surrounded by long arms of blue oaks. After all, make someone talk was his bark from training. Yet 2 years after, he admitted he'd underestimated the church. His briefcase, a numbered lock, kept their secrets. Even years later, I cannot open it. One of the the themes in this manuscript is extinction, and I like hearing of all the natural imagery today, started by Alison, and sort of a thread running through the readers as well. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, specifically the East Bay, which was greatly inhabited by a Japanese population before World War II, well known for cut flower industry and greenhouses. And I went to high school with a lot of those kids. They stopped the seasons. I cover myself in ginkgo leaves, yellow triangles wet from a hose in a dry season. Squint through our yard, a cutout to stark naked drunks, frozen against a black background, a purple floor. Corridor of time when Japanese settled here, left behind silkworms and indigo for greenhouses. And past that shattered glass era, no low fences topped with little roofs remain, along with trees, thread of blood from when whole families were taken to local racetracks and then to the camps. Our neighbors at their move-in party, tight clusters of laughter. They cut down the 2 trees in their yard that took 50 years to mature. Stop the lemons, the yucca with its brusque trunk and feather flowers, the undulating harvest, the seasons. Thank you.
I guess on behalf of everybody, but you always do such a smashing job and gather such great people. Wonderful poems. They're not only full of presence, but an embodiment, but also mind. I mean, they're really wonderful poems, and an editor does a lot of things. I'm going to read. By the way, Alison, I just even ordered the book in between sipping wine, and I'm a Philadelphian by birth. I've been around, but you know, that's a culture to itself. You never get rid of it. I've learned to speak more like American. When I went to college, we studied, geographic linguistics or whatever it was, and the book said that Philadelphia was the origin of standard English, and they showed it spreading across the United States. I don't know, man. All right, here's the poem that's in the Sheila-Na-Gig. Thank you, Haley. It's called Running in Grass. Remember the days when you could run barefoot without counting time through a field of tall grass that invited you to lie down among grasses when you wanted to. Want was the same as need then. Somewhere out of sight, Mom was in a kitchen, and yet her call uncoiled like a rope, reaching my ear, despite the distance I imagined I'd gone from family, home, and everything left behind in the space without imagination. Now it's long since I entered this space without meaning to. I am running, if it is running, not out of joy as a game or a repeated miracle to feel one with the earth, but out of fear that something will catch me. Okay. Another one. Thank you. Honest to God, I've lived in places where actually the communications, and right now my Wi-Fi betray me. I'm on the Olympic Peninsula in the lovely village of Port Townsend. Out here, you guys may have been, we do have water on 3 sides and mountains on 3 or 4 sides. It's quite different from Philadelphia and upstate New York. I'm also going to do one called War Requiem. It's my most recently published poem. It's just out in the Brussels Review from Brussels. I like occasionally trying to get into an out-of-country journal that takes poems in English. And here's the one they did a nice job on. The poem is called War Requiem. You know, the great Benjamin Britten and other things. The rockets came, intended to destroy everything. And we're the ones who launched them in our usual way. We don't know how our love became this battlefield. Eventually, one or more will destroy us. For now, we still believe each of us is right. There's no conclusion, so the argument goes on like an ancient myth. Behind the lines, we gather our forces once more to go nowhere. And one more from all the riches of what I have gathered that I can't open, carefully chose. This one is called Khan, as in Genghis Khan. And it does play off of semi-historical fact as well as myth. It's called Khan. It's 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like some kind of a minimalist. 7 3-line stanzas. Each one seems to make a full sentence. Khan. Some say throat slitter Genghis slid from his horse and finally died after nights of fever. Others hold his fatal wound came from a castrating blade that Tangut princess hid in her hair to strike before he could rape her. She laughed while he wheezed on the hard ground of conquest, now merely a mortal, then threw herself into the Yellow River, having avenged her father's death, which preserved her body for a leap into myth or history, which is as close as we come on earth to immortality. Grandson Kublai, wise ruler of China, though cursed with family, made it into poetry. This poem is for the princess's many daughters who never met her. Who never met her. Thank you. Those are my three. I took an inordinate amount of time to get them open and read them. But it's great to be in this wonderful company.
Well, last but not least, I'm Susan Michele Coronel, and thank you to Haley. And it's been a pleasure listening to all of you read. It's really inspiring, and I'm very happy to be in Sheila-Na-Gig for the first time. This first poem I'm going to read is from the December online issue. Just going to pull that up. And it's called Submerged. Submerged. When I wake, I'm wearing pajamas covered with tiny yellow birds, and one bird is upside down, swaddled in a blanket. I wish I could inherit the upside down bird's sense of composure in a flattened world, learn to swallow the depths of a pool, even if muddled, and never vanish. I learned early on that vanity is like vanishing, creating a replacement for yourself so you can forget who you really are. I know myself well, flaws and all, but most of the time it hurts. My hair blown back like abalone and shocked sea wrack. In my 20s, a doctor with an office and a private home diagnosed me with anemia. His soiled hands rifled through stacks of manila file folders and medical reports on his desk, tainted by rust and dried blood. I was terrified of the diagnosis, more because of the anticipation and the heaviness of the word. But all it meant was more spinach and checking vitamin labels, a kind of piecemealing neither here nor there. But it air dried me, forced me to reassess. On the lawn, I blow a blade of grass between my fingers to hear a whistle, then pretend I'm sleeping at sea. My pillow an oyster shell, my blanket a wrapper sewn with seaweed, and anemone, a double dish of moon floating under waves. The next two poems I'm going to read are from my forthcoming manuscript, which won the Donna Wolf Palacio Prize, and it's coming out from Finishing Line Press in summer of this year. The first one is called To My 30s. I did not swallow your sand or soil when time pimpled days with feathers, or succumb to the weighty rush that wends days into weeks, weeks into years. You offered the promise of more, the heft of rib cage and radish amid the changeability of water. I donned you as the second skin of youth, turning pages of picture books, rocking babies with the ease of song. You sandwiched me between the turbulent 20s and faithless 40s with the language of cotton and napping. I savored sweet childhood dollops and new friendships, how you matched me with other families with children, connections made as easily as breathing. We tugged on lawns and blankets, hugging and yawning, taking photos, riding the wind. Now my bones no longer grow and muscles ache, the path ahead sliced at sharper angles. Sometimes I miss you, look for wild horses in a land that's no longer wild. You gave me the fullness of family before it dissolved like a sugar cube in tea. To my 30s and the brocade of birth, flashes of nipples sought and sweet fingers received in mouth, grasping adult hands. And the last poem I'm going to read is called A Wish Does Not Grow Straight. At my age, every wish seems larger than life, like a giant wishbone made of wood or stone that cannot be severed or altered by hand. What does it sound like when wood speaks? Run to the fire and put out the overwhelm. I allow the wild elm to smother and sway, teach me more about desire's wild ribbons than my tidy garden with its rows of hedges. What is the sound of ribbons unleashed? Memory is simply smoke, fire underground. My red dress swirls around me in a train of miracles, carpeted silence pierced by night birds, footsteps and running water. What does my red dress say to the darkness? The rawness of winter will not swallow me. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for closing us up for the night. Great to meet you and have you here for the first time. Thank you to all our invited mic readers and to our associate editor, Barbara Sable, who helped curate the winter issue. Always a blessing to have her on board, right? Always great. And thank you for all our friends who just came to hang out and listen tonight, and also to Alison Hicks, our featured reader. Again, we are celebrating her book, Homing, from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. And you can find us at sheila-na-gigblog.com. Thank you, everybody.